Okay, I would like everyone to please close your eyes, take a nice big deep breath. I am here only to be truly helpful. I am here to represent him who sent me. I do not have to worry about what to say or what to do because he who sent me will direct me. I am content to be wherever he wishes, knowing he goes there with me. I will be healed as I let him teach me to heal. Amen. Okay, so for the last number, probably of months, I guess, we've been studying intently on this concept of the dream, of how we got here, how this, from the perspective of the Course, how everything has unfolded to get us to where we are. And last week, I introduced our regular chart with all these blocked off parts to it. And I did that very purposefully because when we're born in our world, we only know of this square here. We come into the world, and as the Course explains it, we come in as an innocent victim with circumstances or perpetrators beyond our control that we can't fix or change, and we're just an effect of what's going on the outside. And with very little explanation for that, other than that's the way it is. In fact, when we're born, we literally, physically could not exist if it had not been for someone there to take care of us. So just even from our very first breath, we are aligned with the thought system that I'm an innocent victim of circumstances beyond my control. So we live and breathe our lives within the context of this square, not really knowing that there's anything else beyond that, or a setup, I guess you could say, that led us to that. But from the perspective of the Course, the reason why we found ourselves in this experience is because the Son of God chose to leave oneness. We were all at one point in time, and the Son of God thought, I wonder what it would be like if I could be in control. And the way the story goes with the Course is that we were in oneness. God was the creator, we were the created, and everything that God was, he gave to us. He gave us love, peace, eternity, Christ, joy, innocence, and that we were all the same. And though we liked all those attributes, on some level, we decided we wanted to be God. We wanted to be the maker. We wanted to be in control. We wanted to have some say in what was going on. So we had, as the Course explains, we had that tiny mad idea where the Son of God remembered not to laugh. And with that came the results / effects of what it was to be separate from God. Now there was a me and a God, and with that came guilt, sin, and fear, death, projection, and that we were different. So when we chose to no longer be aligned with God, and we took on the experience of being an individual or separate, we did it at a loss of the love and peace and joy and all the attributes that God gave us. Now, my guess is we did not realize when we made that choice that that was going to be the end result. But the bottom line is that was the end result. And so we ended up over here. Now, the answer to that choice that we made was over here, and it was given to us. But when we got to this point, we already were very enmeshed in the guilt, sin, and fear. It was in our mind, and we didn't trust that God was only love. We thought God was going to steal from us, and he wasn't going to love us, and we didn't feel we were worthy of the love that was our natural heritage. So we had the guilt, sin, and fear in our minds, and then we took it and projected the guilt, sin, and fear out on somebody else or something else in the world so that we could play the part of an innocent victim. So we now, again, pop into the world as that innocent victim, And we don't realize that all these steps took place that caused this experience to occur. So we've lived our whole life in this dream, as the Course says, because the Course is very adamant with the idea that though this is the experience we are having, it is simply a dream. And just like we know when you wake, or when you're having a nighttime dream, while you're dreaming, you can be chased by someone and your blood pressure will increase and your breathing can increase. But when you wake up in the morning, you know that was simply a dream and it had no effect on who you were. Well, this particular dream has been a long-standing dream that we've become extremely invested in. And we believe it's the only reality there is. And the Course comes along to help us to understand that there was a reason why we ended up here, and that we can now make another choice now that we're aware what we did to ourselves, basically. And then when we identified with this character, we became, as the sections we've been reading recently talked about, we became the hero of our dream. In other words, the main focus, the central figure, and everything else around in affecting me in my world, whether it be good things or bad things, are all enmeshed around this character called me. And the whole concept of going back to oneness is there's only one. There isn't a specific character called me in relationship to all the other characters in the world. So what the Course is asking us to do is to become very aware of what having chosen to separate has brought us, and then begin to question, especially in times when life is very difficult, question, do I really want to continue putting my focus and energy on a separated experience that is no longer bringing me something that I really want? And then eventually for us to then drop our investment in it and ask to see it through God's eyes. And then it will reveal this, which will show us that our brothers and we are actually the same instead of different. So that's what that whole setup is. So just anybody have any comments or questions in regard to that explanation? Because we're going to start in a section after this. Go ahead, Sally.
There's this quote that says, "You travel but in dreams while safe at home."
Correct.
Quote, unquote.
Yeah.
And yeah. So I sometimes use that, I think very recently, for my mantra for the day, my thought for the day.
Correct.
And but it doesn't change a lot. I mean, I can direct my thoughts to think about that, but I'm not sure that it changes a lot either.
Okay.
Thought I'm just reporting.
Right. Well, and that is very parallel to one of the statements in the Course where it says, we are Son of God dreaming a dream of exile. We're having this dream of being in exile of who we are, but one of the challenges we face with the Course, even if we start to understand it, we start to practice it, we try to embrace it, is I'm also extremely addicted to being me and being me in relationship to the world. So until I really become convinced that I really want the love of God more than I want absolutely anything else, this is going to call louder. And I think one of the, again, challenges that we have is we want the world to just turn out to be this nice place. And yet if we take the example of Jesus, who is supposed to be the person who wrote the Course, if you think about his quote unquote final days, we would say he didn't look like he was having a very good time. And yet the reason why he was having a good time per se is because he was totally aligned with his right mind. So when you're aligned with your right mind, the same experiences can be occurring on the outside, but it doesn't affect who you are because we will come to a point where we're totally aligned with our true mindset of who we are, and what happens to the world or our bodies or whatever won't have any effect on us. But we have a long journey before we come to the point where we're 100% convinced that that's what this is about. And again, if we could just ask for help and then something in my life just turned out beautifully and wonderful, we'd all be running the course 24 hours a day without any problem. Because, yeah, that's a no-brainer. But it doesn't quite work that way. And it's really helping to lead us to an understanding that the illusion is an illusion. And it really has no effect on who we really are, but to the degree that we invest in the belief of it, it will definitely run the show.
Oh, Marianne,
Yes, Bob.
that was what I would like to add, which helps me a lot, that this thinking is not new. This thinking goes back to thousands of years. And I understand it was written down 3,500 years ago about this being a dream and some of the key things in the Course of Miracles. And like Ken Wapnick says, what Jesus did is brought all these thoughts together. And so this helps me to think that this is nothing new. This is very, very old.
Absolutely. Many of the main cultures on the planet talk about Maya, the dream, the illusion. This is definitely not a new concept. I think for Western minds, I guess you could say it might be a little newer and a little more difficult to embrace, but worldwide it is definitely not a new concept. And yet, if it's been around that long, why is it taking us so long to embrace it and live it? And the reason is, again, because we're so addicted to it. We become so accustomed to it. And I often like to think about the idea of, maybe 10 years ago, most of the people in this group didn't have a phone. And then you get a phone, and then you become so accustomed to the phone. And then pretty soon, if you leave the house without the phone, you think you've left your arm at home or something. And if you don't have a phone, it's something else in your world that we become very attached to, we become very accustomed to. And it's almost impossible for us to imagine our existence without that thing. And yet that literally represents even this character called Marianne, and I'm very addicted to it. It's been with me since I took my seeming first breath in this world, and who knows how long before that. And so it comes along and says, yeah, but that's not who you really are. You're really this over here. Come on over. And we don't even know how invested in the attachment to that character I call me is.
But like Ken Wapnick also says, that not too many people will pick this up now because we don't want to look at ourselves. Yeah. We don't want to look at all this negative stuff. We would rather think how good we are, and God and Jesus is going to come in and fix all of this, and we still want to be the victim. We don't want to be responsible for all this that we see. All this that we see that we don't like, this is us, and we don't like that.
Yes, absolutely. And it's not a real user-friendly course for the ego. It is very user-friendly to find your way back home, but it's not at all comfortable in the process of getting to that realization, because as you said, we don't want to look at ourselves, and we certainly don't want to take responsibility for the concept that what I see is coming from my mind. And what the Course is saying is, what we see here is literally coming from our mind. And just like when you dream at night, where do all the characters go in the morning? They're gone. Where do they come from? They came from the thought in your mind. Well, literally all the characters in our daytime dream come from our mind. So if they're coming from my mind and this one character in my dream seems to be my problem, well, where did that one character come from? Came from the thought in my mind that is a dualistic thought because it's in opposition to the oneness thought where we left home. So we have spent all of our time living in this experience, then projecting it in here so that we wouldn't remember that we were the ones that set this up in the first place. And that takes, a lot of revealing. I took all those black charts off because we really do believe this is all there is. And the Course comes along and says, well, that's your experience, and we have to honor that. But it's coming from this, and there is an ultimate choice of healing, but you have to be willing to look at what you set up and then walk with Jesus to letting it go.
Marianne?
Yes. Hi, Andrea.
Hi, Marianne. I'm interested in what Sally brought up about the words from the Course, and I'm just thinking. I guess I use a system myself, and then because so all we have different from our ho-hum existence is really the words of the Course. Otherwise, we're down in that lower left-hand corner without, just still flailing around. So in using the words of the Course, I felt that Sally was asking a question like, so I use those words and then ho-hum, nothing much happens. And I'm really interested in how that particular thing of the words, I find myself more curious about if I don't understand, if I'm not getting, I'm just feeling like, oh goodness, how could this be? What does this mean? And I find myself becoming more curious about the effect of those words on my being. And then it seems to build up for me. I guess the words don't necessarily make sense, but there's a quality to them, I feel, that makes enlightens the system, enlightens the your path, and to stick with that. That seems to be the only thing to do. And I guess that's my question. Okay.
I want to respond to you, Andrea, using the words. So the words are our thoughts, and our thoughts make the world that we live in, that I live in, you live in, is our thoughts that make the world. I mean, it does get to be pretty physical, like I can touch this table, it's hard, okay, or it may be warm. I mean, those things are very physical, but the rest of it, the words create a world. And I don't know how to say the rest of it, but for me, when I say those words, I seem to, I want to almost say ingest them, but I internalize them. And so like often I say these while I'm walking, and I don't know, they just get into me. That doesn't make much sense, but it creates an experience for me, the words do. And it puts me in a world. It puts me in a different world than if I'm walking along thinking my other ego thoughts.
Well, that's exactly true. And I guess that's what I was questioning, if that was true for you. I also create, it makes a difference. It isn't always that I know what it means or that I'm really that interested in it, knowing, if God loves me, well, la-di-da. Sometimes I feel like, well, so even at this point, still feel like, well, okay, God, where are you? If you love me, you better show me now. I can't do this anymore. And so the words do that. But then often also when you start out with the Course, the words don't make any sense to me, didn't make any sense. And all I have is my overriding curiosity to see if there's any way this could manage and make me feel differently about my problems. So I guess it feels like it isn't instantaneous, but it's like you have to want to know, what's the what's the difference between what I'm thinking about, cooking and eating for dinner, and what I'm thinking about in this realm? Okay, I just wanted to touch that also. I feel like that I use a lot of that, and I've used it for a long time, and it's the only thing there is to help, is what
Well,
I'm thinking.
yeah.
But I guess Marianne, I'm guess I'm gonna throw it back to her, because that's what I'm thinking. If I'm more curious about what these words, or where these words are gonna take me, than I am about what I'm gonna have for dinner and how I'm gonna get here or there in my own mind, then I feel like I'm succeeding with the course.
Sally, did you have anything else? And then I'll speak.
Yeah, I wanted to say that it creates the words for me. If I think long enough, it creates for me an experience, and that is good for me. And also the other part is also faith. Like sometimes I might not believe the words that I'm reading, or whatever, but there's also this thing of faith. So I don't know everything, even on the real level or the real physical level. I don't know everything. So okay, I have these words and they say some pretty profound things. I like profundity. I like that. I quit.
I'd like to comment on that. Marianne, I'd like to comment on that a little bit.
Sure.
Good, Jason, go.
So when I'm asking the Holy Spirit for help, I found it helpful today to say, I do not have to know what to say or what to do. You will direct me. So, and every time I got another thought in my head, I just kept saying that to myself. And eventually my mind stopped putting new thoughts out.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was like a mantra basically, but it was, I wasn't trying to visualize something or trying to see an outcome or anything else like that. I was just putting that out there.
Okay.
So I understand what Sally's talking about,
Right.
words.
Well, I think when we first begin, and certainly if we look at the workbook lessons, there's a workbook lesson for every day of the year. And for Dawn, I don't know if you're familiar with the book yet or not, but the book is divided up in 3 sections, and the middle section is the workbook section. And we know, if you've been practicing the course for any length of time, that Jesus is very specific with each lesson. There is a title, he talks about it, and then oftentimes within the context of the workbook lesson, he will, suggest that you remember that statement, 3 times a day or whatever it happens to be. So I think when we first begin the process of working with the course, it's like we're grasping for straws of anything that helps us to refocus, to re-remember, I guess you could say. And eventually we will probably not need that aspect of it, but in the initial phases, which could be 100 years, who knows, it's very helpful. And if you think about, if I have those words that come to light in my mind, even for a second, that is a representative that I'm not quite as stuck here as I was before. Because here there was no access to anything, but I'm an innocent victim of circumstances beyond my control. And that's all there is. And I got to maneuver the world to make this person do something different so that I could be okay. And what the Course would say is, even if they did what you thought you wanted them to do, you're not going to be okay, because this is what's running the show. So that the words and the refocusing are very helpful. We don't want to miss the concept that if I'm here, it's because I wanted to be here. That's a real important aspect of the understanding and then practice of the Course. If I just almost use the words or the mantra as a band-aid to kind of appease myself for a second, which does make us feel better, and I'm not suggesting you don't do that, but we need to eventually realize, if I'm here and if I'm uncomfortable, suffering pain, or whatever it may be, it's literally because I want to be here via the choice of separating from God. And until I want to align with God and ask to be shown what that represents, this is really what I want, no matter what my mouth is saying. Okay, so we really want to eventually lead ourselves to the understanding of, if I'm here, it's because this is what I want. And if I want this, it means I don't want this. So eventually we'll come to the point where we'll be absolutely willing to drop all investments in what any of this represents, and we'll go, I don't know, show me what truth is. Okay, so again, we're all coming from slightly different places and slightly different levels of awareness in regard to the practice of this. But eventually, and in the little pamphlet called The Song of Prayer that was written shortly after the course was finished, it gives the progression of prayer, and it explains all forms of prayer are good and helpful, but the highest form of prayer is, show me who I am. And anywhere along that ladder of prayer that you are is perfect for where you are. But eventually it will come to that simple realization, I'm not at peace, I've had enough of that, show me what truth is. And again, take the steps of where you are and embrace them, but then keep, going up that ladder of, I want to know who I am, and that's all that's important to me.
So Marianne, would
Yes.
you say that the words of the course then build you up until you can make the choice? That reading it, reading all the things, it builds you up, sets a stage more or less, gives you. For me, I finally got in touch with how what God's love for me means. And then that was like a chunk of information that came with the words. And then that seemed to free up the other things about it, about reading the daily lessons, and just getting more used to the way, I think, to learning how much I don't know, or learning how much I felt that God didn't love me. And not really knowing that, but that's what the words do in the course.
Right. And you have to understand that though God remains love totally consistently with unequivocality, when we separated as the son of God, and at that point there was just one son, we then made of God something other than what he was. Okay, so we, literally, let me just show you this chart. There was a me and a something else, and that initial something else was a God. And I guess you could say the laws of separation are that which we don't want to look at in ourselves, we project out into the world. So the very first character, I guess you could call it, that we projected onto was God. So we made of God something other than what God was. And the course is actually very specific with that. And it's called the God of specialness. So this God that we experience in duality is a God that, as we sometimes read in the Bible, where he does bad things, or he causes the floods and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's the God of the ego. That's not this God of love that remains consistently, absolutely, positively pure love under any circumstances, no matter what we choose to do with the dream. That's the God we are being, I guess you could say, reintroduced to through a lot of the workbook lessons, because you'll read certain places where it'll say, God weeps for you, he wants to put his arms around you, things like that. Well, this God is totally formless, but because we're in a body, it's helpful for us to think of God as in a body, and it's helpful for us to see God represented as a loving, caring, embracing experience, because we're so far beyond that with the image of a God who's wrathful, he's going to come and get you, he's going to cause your death, all those images that we have wrapped around the concept of this God are not loving images. And yet the God of what the Course is trying to help us lead to is a totally, again, absolutely purely loving experience. And we only see God from something other than that, and we only see our brother as something other than a loving character because we're looking through the lens of a dualistic thought system. And so again, the Course is here to help us rethink the process of what we are experiencing in the world, and to then re-question, why would I align myself with a thought system that makes my brother guilty so that I can appear to be innocent, and that makes a God wrathful who is purely absolute love? And eventually we will be very willing to drop our investment in this thought system because it no longer serves us. Why would I choose this if I knew only love and everything that comes with the attributes of love was my true nature and the true nature of my brother as well as God? And to then use anything that comes up from the identification of this thought system and re-question it through the lens of what the Course is helping us lead to. And if I'm afraid of God, if I'm afraid of my brother, why is it that I am holding thoughts of fear in my mind that project into the world and are represented in a world that I'm afraid of, when love is sitting here waiting for me to find it or return to it? And
Yes.
it's always a choice that we make, individually in every moment. And we do it individually because when we were here, we were all one. We then projected and splintered into the world as individual beings with the characteristics of two parts of our mind, of which we forgot this part of our mind. And we've lived fully since the Big Bang from this point of view. So the answer is hiding behind it, much like the clouds covering up the sun. But we didn't realize that that was an option before. We just had this to choose from, and we did the best we could to survive within the context of the dualistic experience. Any comments?
Marianne, it's
Yes.
Helene. Yeah, I guess I have a question in here someplace, but let me start by saying that recently I have had experiences. You mentioned earlier, we think we left home, but we never really left home. What we're experiencing, quote, here is an illusion. Well, I've had some experiences of being at home. And then, of course, the ego comes back in and it spins my head around 360 degrees. And then I carry on and I react to that and I go on. But as sort of as a byproduct of that, things have come up, maybe remembrances from the past, and I see them in a different way. And what it seems like to me is, well, that never really happened. That's part of the illusion. And it's sort of like someplace in the Course, it talks about everything has happened. We're just rolling the carpet back up, and getting home, on our way home. So I have the experience of oneness. I come back to being separate because I'm terrified of the idea of oneness. But part of what I come back with is that remembrance of oneness grows stronger every time I allow it.
Absolutely, right on. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And in fact, the Course has a section where it talks about the idea every time you leave this and come over here, and as you said, get slam dunked back here, because we're not ready for only oneness where I don't exist. So we get slam dunked back over here. You literally are not the same person that left when you went over here. because a part of your mind has become more healed, which means less of your mind is invested in this. Yeah, there's still a lot of it that's invested in this, but there's a bigger part of you that is now more invested in this than it used to be. And so literally every time we ask for help, even if I could come back here and it could be worse than it was before I left, still I am becoming healed of my investment in this versus being invested in this.
It changes the whole way I look at the world.
Yes, 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 yes. And I loved your example of how you're now starting to see things that you've gone through before and realize that, there's a part of your mind that starts to go, but it's it's like it's such a distant memory that it just doesn't have the effect that it did before. And it's a beautiful thing. And I'm going to share a story. There was a gal that was in the course for years ago, and she said she used to get these letters from her father. And she always felt that her father wanted a boy instead of a girl and that he didn't like her. So when she would get these letters, she would read them through the lens of this, okay? Always, all right? So years later, she was cleaning out her basement, came across a box of all these letters from her father, and she reread them. And this was after she'd been in the course for a while. And they totally had a different meaning to her than they did back then. And these are the kinds of experiences we will begin to have as we keep processing through this, because it's like the mind that is reading the letters that were identical letters that they were when the mind was reading them from this point have a different experience on you.
Wait a
And,
minute,
yes,
Marianne.
go ahead.
What are you talking about exactly? You said she read it through the lens of, your brother being the perpetrator, right?
Originally, yes.
Originally, so how was she doing that with these letters?
Well, if you're identified with the ego, you couldn't possibly read those letters through any other lens. That's the automatic lens that we all live through. As she began to practice the course and her mind became more healed, she read the identical letters and saw them from a totally different perspective.
And that's the byproduct.
That's the byproduct, yes.
Of changing your mind.
Correct. And I mean, the ways that it will get reflected in your world can be totally different from different people, but somehow within yourself you will know a major shift has occurred, and I now see this experience through a totally different way of looking. And that's, as Helene said, that's the byproduct. And I know some of you have been practicing the course for a long time, and you think you probably are doing what it's asking you to do. And oftentimes we go through extended periods of time where I keep asking and I keep asking and I keep asking, and it appears like not a damn thing is happening, but I'm trying to be a good student and I keep practicing. And then an opening occurs, and all of a sudden there is this reflection of light that is unmistakable and irreversible once you've had that experience. And it is those moments that will really catapult your experience, because now you trust. Now you know, I've seen the light, man. and you want more of that. That becomes your addiction rather than this.
Go for the opening.
Yes, yeah. And those are beautiful experiences, well worth the effort that you put in to get to that point. But it's quite a ride getting to that point.
Marianne?
Yes, Amy.
In listening to this, I become aware of the fact that my relationship with my mother was definitely colored by what she did, how she did things, and how she did this and how she did that. And so I had a lot of unfinished feelings around my mother, and I had them. Well, luckily I had them when she was, I guess, like 85. I decided now I'm gonna, and then I had started to get into the course, and I think that's exactly what happened to me. I just stopped seeing my mother for some, because I knew that she couldn't help it. I mean, there so many things about, the Course and how it explains to us how everyone really is and what everyone really is going through. And that when I had, I stuck by her, and I went to see her, and I did all the things that a good daughter was supposed to do. And I was still sad because she didn't really seem to acknowledge that or appreciate it or even want it as far as that goes. And then by the time when, she was actually ready to leave the planet, I felt strong enough that I didn't, in her last months, I mean, I had gone back and forth thinking she was going to pass away like a whole year before she did. And I just was able to just say, no, I'm just not going to go there anymore, because I can, I know that whatever I do, it doesn't matter. And I asked God to help me heal it. I stopped doing things. Because that's what made me sad, is I was doing things and I wasn't being acknowledged, or I felt that I was doing things wrong. Even at the end of her life, I wasn't able to really comfort her. And then through the Course, I was led to the fact that the only comforter is God. And it didn't require my physical being to be anywhere at all to experience, for her to be comforted and for me to be comforted. And that's what helped me. When she left the planet, I was at peace. There wasn't any unfinished business, I guess you could call it, where oh, now she's dead and look at that, like all that language and that consternation around death, in this case. And that was completely absent when my mother actually did leave the planet. And I attribute that, being able to have that freedom and feel peaceful, more peaceful than I was running back and forth there and trying to do something. And that cleared it all up for me then.
Right. And something you said that really stuck in my mind is basically what you were saying, I wanted to fix it, make her okay. And isn't that the setup of our beingness? And that sounds like such a wonderful thing to do, for me to be responsible for taking care of somebody else. And yet she has to make that choice by herself. And when we connect with the
I guess what was really it was like the best I had to offer. It was like, this is, she raised me to take care of things, to help, to be helpful, to, cheer people up. I had that feeling from, day one, that this is how you're supposed to live. And I always took that with me. And with my mother, it was like I was like just beating my head against a rock. And I couldn't imagine what else I could do.
Yeah. And
it just, it broke my heart. And I just continued to try. And then, with the Course, I said, well, God knows that I love her and would do anything for her. And God said, then you just stay home and relax, because God knows that, and she knows God, and you'll be okay.
Andrea, it's like you're saying you recognize that the difference between doing and being. And the ego thought system is all about doing something, and God is just being. And the only thing the Course asks us to do is to accept forgiveness for ourselves, because there is no one else in the mind.
Right.
And everything about that was separation, was so she won't know if I care, if I don't go there. She won't know, and I and she were different. And then how I became aware that we were the same, to me, is absolutely a miracle, because I had no other tool. I had no other tool or recourse. And I think that people, a lot of times, they feel, then you feel helpless, and then you feel this and that, and you think that just goes, that's the way it goes. oh, well, this is how it goes. But I learned that if I want God, that then it goes differently, and it goes a lot better. And it goes, I mean, it's just, 100% better than it was.
And I think a great deal of the practice of the course is to begin to trust when I get out of the way and give him control of the reins. It turns out much better than if I was in control. And we're not at that place of complete trust at this point, but as we keep practicing, we will align more and more with, his will's the answer, mine is not. Mine's not really working out all that good anyways.
Yeah, I mean, how there really isn't anything to do was very confounding to me. Well, what do you mean there isn't anything to do? And my sister, she was exhausted and asking me, and I would go. And then God helped me take a stand and say, well, I've been and I've done, and that's it, because she's doing fine without me being there. And then I felt her love. Even I felt that she loved me. I remembered that that's how it works. I remembered that, I was her child, and she loved me, and she was just having a hard time. And that's how it always was. If she had a hard time, I had to know about it. And then I would just feel bad. And I guess, finally it came through my head that if I don't go along with this hard time and just keep asking the Holy Spirit, who am I? Where do I belong? And, wanting to feel the peace, then finally, that's what, to me, it was a miracle, because I would have been upset still, or whatever. And instead I was able to actually see her light, that her light came through. So thank you.
And I think it's also important, that we understand that we don't just come to the course on Saturday and talk about it or read about it. It's about actually applying it to our life experiences wherever and whatever it is that we're having happen in our world. And for you, for a long time, it was your relationship with your mother and her dying process. For another person, it could be a job situation or a health problem. So to begin to apply the process of the course to whatever specifics are occurring in your life, because that's the arena of practice for our individual journey. All right, anybody else have any comments? And then we're going to move on to a section in the course. I'm not hearing any voices. So we are going to go to text page 262. It's in chapter 14. And we're going to go in section X1, paragraph 1, the test of truth. But it's page 262.
Hey, Marianne, when I'm looking in 262 in my book, it's chapter 13.
Really? All right.
Yeah.
Let's see. 262. Huh.
Let's
That's
see.
a good thing to know. The test of truth. All right. I don't know how I got 262, but it's 296. But thank you for pointing that out, Mark. 296. Wow. I have to change that. Wow.
296.
Oh,
there we go. Okay.
I had it marked in the next paragraph, the correct page, but for some reason I didn't on that one. That's weird. All right, thank you for calling that to our attention. All right, so again, text 296, the test of truth, and we're going to start with paragraph 1. Yet the essential thing is learning that you do not know. Knowledge is power, and all power is of God. You who have tried to keep power for yourself have lost it. You still have power, but you have interposed so much between it and your awareness of it that you cannot use it. Everything you have taught yourself has made your power more and more obscure to you. You know not what it is nor where. You have made a semblance of power and a show of strength so pitiful that it must fail you. For power is not a seeming strength, and truth is beyond semblance of any kind. Yet all that stands between you and the power of God in you is but your learning of the false and of your attempt to undo the true.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. I love the first line. Yet the essential thing is learning that you do not know. And before I go on with that, I do want to go back to Andrea's story in regard to her mother. And for her, she eventually came to this awareness that she didn't have to do the busy work of running back and forth because her mom lived out of town to see her. But I think it's important as we begin our steps on this journey, it doesn't mean that we're going to stop doing things in the world immediately. In fact, we'll probably continue to think we need to be in control of the world and take care of business. But the most important thing of anything is whether you choose to do something or not do something, that you keep remembering to choose to drop the investment in the ego and choose for the Holy Spirit, because that will eventually lead you to the awareness of what your next step should be. But whether you do it or don't do it, don't forget to do this, because this is really vital. And another way to think about this is, and I've given this example before, is if you're have a big puddle in your living room because the roof is leaking, you need to clean the floor in the kitchen because people could trip on it, fall in it, and hurt themselves. But eventually you need to get on the roof and fix the roof, because if you don't fix the roof, you're going to continue to have to clean the floor for eons of time. So you take care of business, but you get up and do what is necessary to fix where the real problem lies. All right, so back to paragraph 1 on page 296. All right, so yet the essential thing is learning that you do not know. And as I began the course, I had all these covered over, and the only thing that was revealed was this. And that's where all of us lived all of our lives until we had a slight inclination of understanding what the course is. We didn't know this, or the effects of this. We only knew the effects of this choice, of which is a very teeny tiny part of the whole picture, of which we cannot come to an answer or an understanding as long as that's all we can see and that's all we can experience, which again is where we all start on this process of the course. So when he's saying this, and I mentioned last week that Jesus is actually kind of humorous in the fact that he will tell us where we are on our journey, even though we don't know that's where we are on our journey. And this is just another excellent example of him literally letting us know, you haven't got a clue, guys. And there's a section where he talked about judgment. And he says very specifically, it's not that you shouldn't judge your brother, it's that it's impossible for you to judge your brother. Because in order for you to judge your brother, you would have to know absolutely everything about your brother, past and future, and anything else in order to judge. Well, that doesn't keep us from judging, but he does try to open up that door of awareness that, you're really clueless, guys. So if you think you know something, the facts are you really don't know anything. So it might not be a bad idea for you to, move off the throne and let me get on the throne, and then we'll get some answers here. But as long as you insist on thinking there's never going to be an answer that's going to be the correct answer. Not because you're stupid, not because you're bad, not because you've done things wrong, none of that. Simply because you're not in as long as you identify with duality, you don't have access to the answer as it is presented in truth. And the more we consciously at least embrace that concept, the more gently we will approach ourselves when we continue to play in the arena of the ego. So again, yet the essential thing is learning that you do not know. And I would say not only learning that we do not know, but accepting the possibility that I don't know, because the whole deal of this box is I know above God what's right and what's truth. And I certainly know above my brother what's right. And the facts are, as he's saying, is no, you don't.
The most useful, practical, and helpful thing that I've learned in the course is those 3 little words, I don't know.
Yes.
I give up, I yield, take it, God, and thank you.
Correct. Absolutely correct. And in order for me to let go of the investment in this, I have to really come to that awareness that I don't know. I don't have the, well, and Jesus even speaks in the course, we don't know what the problem is, let alone the answer. So how could I possibly solve a problem that I don't understand and look through a lens of limitation to gander the correct answer? It's not available. It's not happening, as they say. So that's a very big step. Yes, go ahead.
Marianne, may I add that I still persist in thinking that I do know stuff.
Without question. But there's a little teeny part of your mind that's willing to accept the possibility, even if we can, and again, we keep cleaning the kitchen floor instead of getting up on the roof because we're so addicted to living life from here. But the very fact that a little teeny tiny part of your mind is willing to accept that as a possibility is huge. And that will continue to grow, just like when you invest in this bank account instead of this one. Your ability to understand more fully increases. And you know, I've given the example many times of being in a car and driving down the street and you see, you know, a stop sign and a house and a street light and whatnot. But if you're in an airplane observing that car, you see a much vaster array of understanding of what's going on. Well, every time we literally ask for help, we're rising above the battleground of the limitedness that we see and experience the world through. So we're really expanding our understanding and our awareness rather than limiting our understanding and awareness. Okay, so he goes on to say, knowledge is power. And let me explain real quick what the concept of knowledge. Our knowledge is over here. Knowledge has nothing, in this context, has nothing to do with your ability to have a mind that has knowledge and information. It is when you align with truth, you will have the knowledge of that truth. And again, it has nothing to do with information that our brain can gander. So when he says knowledge is power, he means when you align with knowledge, you have the power of God, because you will then realign with all the attributes that God has given you. So knowledge is power, and all power is of God. What we call anything that came after the separation has nothing to do with the knowledge that this is speaking about. And it is the knowledge of God of which I am a recipient of, as long as I align with the oneness that God offers me. But if I cover it over by this false experience, I am not going to have the ability to connect with it. You have tried to keep power for yourself and have lost it. And again, anytime there's quotes around a word in the course, it's speaking through the lens of the ego. So what this means is we think we've lost it, but all we've done is cover it over by this thought system. We can't lose what we are. We can have the experience of losing what we are, but we can't ultimately lose what we are. And much like the visual here of this is the Holy Spirit, it's there all the time. We've simply covered it over, and we could call this the sun. We covered it over by this big, dark, ugly cloud, and all we experience is the big, dark, ugly cloud, which is the result of choosing for separation instead of love. But the love doesn't go anywhere. And just like, you know, a dark day in Cleveland, the sun is there, even though I can't experience it at this moment. And a lot of the course is helping us to understand why we can't access it. In fact, one of the primary lines of the course is that this is a course in removing the blocks to the awareness of love. But in order to remove the blocks to the awareness of love, I have to understand what the blocks are. You know, we all just want to be here. But this process of the course is going to, go step by step in us looking at what it is we've chosen, so that I can then question, is this a block I want to continue to live my life through? Or am I ready to toss this out of the way because I know it's not bringing me what I want? And I now want just that peace and love. You still have power. All right, let's see. You still have the power, but you have interposed so much between it and your awareness of it, you cannot use it. So again, as long as I'm identified with the ego, I cannot access the truth and I cannot use it. Years ago, we did a workshop in the Course in Miracles, and I, because my mind is sick, we all know that. I brought this big chart that was like a big, huge hamburger. And, the visual was the hamburger, though it's split in half and it's filled in with this burger, the bun itself is really all there. Well, we focused all of our energy on the burger and have forgotten that the bun is still intact and is still there. And we don't realize how much we are keeping ourselves from experiencing that love because we're so addicted to identifying with me and then everything in relationship to me and the world. And as long as we're focusing on that, we can't experience the truth of what we are. It's sitting there waiting for us whenever we drop this. All right. So I'm going to read that again. You still have the power. So the power doesn't go anywhere. It's always, 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 always available. But to the degree that I invest in the opposite of that, I will not experience the power that is mine. And then he goes on to say, but you have interposed so much between it and your awareness of it that you cannot use it. And what is it that we've interposed? It's all the ways that we think of ourselves as a separate being and in relationship to everything else that's separate as well, which basically means our entire world, which basically is the reason why it's a bit difficult for us to just, let this go in one easy swoop, because this is all we've known since the Big Bang, and we relate to it as our existence. So it's going to be a process of dropping, of letting go, of refocusing in order to get to the point, and desire, because I still want this. And as long as I still want any aspect of being an individual, special, different, or any of the things of the world, that means I don't really want that as much. So everything you have taught yourself has made your power more and more obscure to you. And what have we taught ourselves? We've taught ourselves that this is who I am. I am an innocent victim of circumstances beyond my control. And if this perpetrator would leave me alone, I could be okay. But that's never going to answer the problem, because the perpetrator is part of my mind that I don't want to look at. And in order to get the understanding that this is what has caused this, and understand that having chosen for this was probably not the best idea, if indeed I totally want peace in the connection of love. If I want this now, I have to be willing to look at what got set up here so that I can become aware of what I taught myself and question, do I want to continue to obscure my understanding of love by playing this game that isn't really giving me what I want any longer? You know not what it is nor where. So again, it's almost like if you're walking down the street and you're looking, the sun's behind you and you're looking forward. You can't see the sun. It's there, you can't see it. And until you turn towards the sun and look at the sun, you won't know of its existence. Well, we've turned against the sun. We've walked in the total opposite direction of the sun, and that's all we see and experience. And it requires us to stop looking that way and turn around and look towards the answer in order to have that experience. but we didn't even know that. All right, so you have made a semblance of power and show of strength so pitiful that it must fail you. So the concept of a semblance of a power. When we sit on the throne as the separated son, we have the semblance of power. I'm on the throne, man. I got the control. But what we got with it is that I'm no longer aligned with God. I'm in the opposition to God. I'm separate from God. Then I project it into the world and I'm separate from my brother, and I hold this guilt, sin, and fear and death and projection in my mind, thinking that, wow, I'm on the throne. I've got control. But what did it bring me? Okay, and we have to keep examining, what did it bring me? You know, when Andrea was talking about her experience with her mother, what it brought her was the separation from her mother, this pain from the relationship with her mother, till she turned it around and started giving it over to questioning it and asking to see it through God's eyes. So then she could see her mother from a totally different light, even though her mom may have been doing the exact same thing that she did before. We begin to take off the tinted glasses of the ego and then see more clearly what was there the whole time. All right, so again, you have made a semblance of power and a show of strength so pitiful that it must fail. Well, this has to fail. It's not our heritage. It's not who we are. We can play in this arena for as long as we want, but it's always going to fail, because the answer to love doesn't exist here. And we can never find love in this pretend world that we've set up. Although we know we've made what the Course calls special love, which is a form of love with conditions. It's a contract with another individual that I'm going to do for you and then you're going to do for me, and then we're going to call that love. But that has nothing to do with the love that God offers us. All right, so for power is not a seeming strength, and truth is beyond semblance of any kind. So the power that we've gained is a false power. It's a power that has no real strength to it. And the truth will lie behind or beyond this power that we have accepted as our truth. But we have to be willing to drop this in order to experience this. And, you know I've said this many, many times, and Jesus isn't asking us to drop our entire existence. He's asking us to drop, by the little willingness in this instant, what I'm experiencing, to find another awareness. And as we are willing to do that more and more frequently, we will trust that when I drop my semblance of power, that a power far greater than that will arise to the surface. And as we become more comfortable with that, and we see the reflection of love instead of the reflection of guilt, sin, and fear in our world, we're going to trust that that's probably not a bad idea. That's a better choice than the one I've been dealing with. Though, as Helene said, I'm going to go back and forth many, 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 many times before I'm 100% convinced that this is a better deal than the one that I had before. Yet all that stands between you and the power of God in you is but your learning of the false and of your attempts to undo the true. And what are the learning of the false? Well, the learning of the false was accepting the separation as my heritage instead of the truth of who I really am. And every moment that we choose for this, we are attempting to undo the truth. And there's a line between these two. You're either aligned with truth or you're aligned with the false. And again, much of the Course is helping us to understand what the false is and how it's not bringing you what you really want. And it's available to have the truth as long as whenever I want it, but I have to be willing to drop the false. And we like to be in control, so it's not easy for us to let go of the false until it finally dawns on us that the value of letting go of the false outrides the effects of what the false will bring us. And when we get tired of the guilt, sin, and fear, we get tired of trying to figure it out and trying to do it in the world, we eventually will be willing to drop it to find out that a far greater experience rises or bubbles to the surface when we do it. So any comments about that paragraph before we go on?
I just wanted to I guess that paragraph is clarifying even more what I went through with my mother. So if anything, I was the virtuous one doing the right thing, or according to my idea, to my ego. If anything, I kept wondering why I didn't feel it was working the way I thought it was supposed to work. So it was just this constant kind of, here I am, and I'm going to do this, and someone in the background going, well, what are you doing? You're not doing anything.
Yeah.
And feeling that kind of frustration, so that actually had to lead me away from itself. I just couldn't, so it was just a total frustration, whereas I felt it would be that's what would bring me peace. Yeah. So I had all that going on about it. That it's real, that whatever you're thinking about, it isn't working, and yet you're still thinking that's all there is to do. So I guess I felt like that paragraph addressed that particular issue, that my idea, my power, my strength was all that I could do, and it wasn't true. It didn't make peace. It didn't help. It didn't make peace. It didn't do anything, which is what you said. Like, we don't know anything. That's, how all that didn't do anything was a mind blower, and that's what opened the miracle.
Right. And I think we all have come to a place on some level in our lives where we've attempted to do whatever we could do within the world to make things better, or fix them, or change them, or whatever. And then I think we come to that point where, I've tried my best to do anything and everything I could to fix the problem, and it's still not answered. The problem hasn't been solved. And it's at that moment, then we really start turning towards the Holy Spirit for an answer, because we know we can't do it on our own. And the results aren't very shiny whenever I do try to do it on my own. But again, we were brought up in a world that said, you need to be responsible. You need to take care of business. And the Course is trying to help us understand there is another way.
And I think also there's that feeling of, who are you if you don't, who are you if you don't help, if you don't take care of things? And that isn't what it's based on. And that's when that love of God became, you are a perfect child of God. Forget about whatever else you have to do. Just, that's really what you are. That's why all your stuff isn't working, because you don't really have to do anything. And that was the opening. That was truly the opening, and that moment when I felt God's love, and it wasn't conditional anymore.
Right. And I think if we really boil this down, anything we do from a place of limit is going to be limited. It doesn't have the availability for wholeness. And, we're always coming from our limited thought system about ourselves, about anybody else, about the experiences in the world. And we're trying to solve the problem in the context of the belief system of being limited. Yeah, I got to make sure I got the right word falling out of my mouth, of being limited. And the answer doesn't lie in that ability to, the answers aren't available there. And yet, again, how often, many times, many ways, we've attempted to solve the problems on our own. Thinking that, well, not only thinking that was all we had to work with, but literally that was all we had to work with, as long as all the rest of these, squares are not available to us. I only had this to work with. And
If you're not at peace, all you have to do is choose again. But that doesn't mean the situation is going to change, but
correct,
your attitude towards the picture is going to change.
correct.
And then you will have peace. That's all you got to do.
Yep.
Very simple.
That's
And
correct.
it works.
Yes.
Simple but not easy.
Simple but not easy, yeah. Because we're so accustomed to being in charge. You know, we literally chose this because we wanted to be in charge. You know, God was in charge before. We wanted to be the creator. We wanted to be the one in charge. So we've been doing that since the Big Bang. And so to relinquish being in charge or in control is anti my very existence on planet Earth. Although that's the answer.
That when I choose again, I seem to automatically leave it go.
Good.
Comes automatic. I don't have to do nothing else.
Excellent. Well, that's where it's taken us, definitely.
No.
Okay, on to paragraph 3. Atonement teaches you how to escape forever from everything that you have taught yourself in the past by showing you only what you are now. Learning has been accomplished before its effects are manifest. Learning is therefore in the past, but its influence determines the present by giving it whatever meaning it holds for you. Your learning gives the present no meaning at all. Nothing you have ever learned can help you understand the present or teach you how to undo the past. Your past is what you have taught yourself. Let it all go. Do not attempt to understand any event or anything or anyone in its light, for the darkness in which you try to see can only obscure. Put no confidence at all in darkness to illuminate your understanding, for if you do, you contradict the light and thereby think you see the darkness. Yet darkness cannot be seen, for it is nothing more than a condition in which seeing becomes impossible. All right, so atonement, which again, atonement means the Holy Spirit's plan of correction to undo the ego and heal the belief in separation, which came into being after the creation of, came into creation. In other words, the atonement came into creation of the Holy Spirit after the separation. So basically the atonement's the answer to the mistake that we made through the process of the Holy Spirit. So the atonement teaches you how to escape forever from everything that you have taught yourself in the past by showing you only what you are now. So when we live within the context of the separated world, literally everything we do, everything we see, everything we experience is coming from an experience of the past. And as long as I'm living in the experience of the past, I cannot experience the now or the moment, this moment. And the only way I can experience the moment is to drop my investment in everything that I think I know in regard to what my past has brought to the surface. And, you know, as this section began, but you don't know anything. And as long as I'm bringing the past to the moment, I'm not going to access the answer that is true for now.
Yeah.
End of story. It can't be done because we don't have the wherewithal within the separated state to come forth with an answer of the now. We only can see or experience that which is a connection with the past. And of course, it was all set up that way so that we would stay in this limited experience. Again, we made a contract with the ego when we set this all up that we were never, ever, 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 ever going to look back. And we've been doing it through that lens for a very long time. And
That perhaps is what I'm doing. When I'm doing that is leaving it go, is coming back and being in the past.
Well,
Maybe I'm being in the past.
could be. Or if you,
No. I mean in the now.
oh, in the now. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay. Yes.
When I turn it over,
Right. Right.
and I leave it go, that I'm probably in the now.
Yes, correct. Yes. And that's basically when we drop the past, that's what happens is we then, for a moment at least, are in the now because we're not clouded by our
Right.
history, basically. Yes, definitely. Okay. All righty. So again, we really want to become aware. Oh, I know I started to say that Ken used to say that the number one most important thing of this course is to help us understand there is another way. Even if I'm not ready to choose for that other way, the fact that I know this is an effect of this choice and this isn't bringing me what I thought I wanted and I'm ready for a change, that there is an answer beyond my limited ability to see and experience the world. Even if I'm not ready to choose it, it's sitting there waiting for me the moment that I do become ready to use it. All right, so learning has been accomplished before its effects are manifest. And, oftentimes I think in any spiritual progression or whatever, we want to see the effects and then I'll make the choice. But that's not the way this works. The way this works is you're going to see the effects of the choice that was made. Then you need to drop it, and then you will see the effects of what you have now chosen. And that will reflect the choice that's been made now. But as good little egos who are very accustomed to thinking we need something from the store, we go to the store, it's at the store. Well, that's not really the way it works. The store is there because we've manifested it to be there by the thought system that we have aligned with. But that's not at all our experience. And this is going to shift our understanding of that experience. So learning is therefore in the past, but its influence determines the present by giving it whatever meaning it holds for you. And what is the meaning it holds for you? If I align with the ego, the meaning it holds for me is to perpetuate the illusion, to perpetuate the lies, to perpetuate the false. And when I again begin to align with truth, then the meaning will reflect the connection with love, and I'll see my brothers as the same instead of seeing differences in the world. So again, who's running the show? Is it my ego identification, or is it the dropping of the investment in the ego and choosing for truth that will then bring to me the answer or the purpose that I now seek? And understand, the purpose of this was done because we wanted to be separate, we wanted to be an individual, we wanted to be in control. So the returning back to this requires that we drop all of those things, which, as Marty mentioned before, is a lot easier to talk about than doing sometimes, especially if we're really invested in something. So your learning gives the present no meaning at all. So again, it's not about learning, it's about what choice do I make, and what choice I make will determine the effects that I will experience. Nothing you have ever learned can help you understand the present or teach you how to undo the past. And the reason is because this is not about understanding. It's not about learning. It's about you're identified with this thought system or you're identified with this thought system. Now, having said that, and having discussed earlier this concept of, as we study and practice the course, we hone in on the words that the course provides, and those words begin to feed us because they're telling us a different story than the story we've identified with. But the ultimate undoing process goes beyond the words. It's a dropping of all words to allow the truth to come to the surface. So nothing you have ever learned can help you understand the present, because the present doesn't have an ability of learning. And again, though we will take the steps of learning the information of the course to come to that moment where we drop everything to then get the answer. Your past is what you have taught yourself. And again, as long as we're living in the concept of the past, we're living in the experience of what we have taught ourselves, which keeps us from understanding or experiencing the answer or the effect of the now. And again, this was done very purposefully. We set it up that way so that we'll constantly be playing in the past. And this particular paragraph doesn't talk about the future, but look at how much time and energy we focus in on the future too. You know, will I have enough money? Will this happen? Will that happen? And both of those are traps to keep us from literally living in the moment. And Jesus has the cry, let it all go. The past, the future, any concepts of thinking you know the answer, let it all go. And again, sounds easy, but in our experience, because we're so addicted to being in control, that is not at all easy. But the universe has this very unique way that it will continue to present to us what we ordered, and it will exhaust us eventually. So one day we will let it all go, because we can't contain the weariness of the ego any longer. And then we'll let it go and we'll pop back, and we'll let it go and we'll pop back, and then we'll let it go and pop back. But eventually we'll stay here a little longer and not pop back as quickly. Do not attempt to understand any event or anything or anyone in its light, for darkness in which you try to see can only obscure. So again, if we're looking in the darkness or we're looking in the context of the ego thought system, we're not going to find the light. The light does not exist here. It's not personal. You're not stupid. You haven't done it wrong. You've just been looking in the wrong place because that's where you thought, that's what you thought, that's all you had to work with, literally. And now we are revealing another layer of understanding to find out that the problem doesn't even lie here. And I know I told the story not too long ago of the guy that is looking for something he lost in the house out in the front street, and somebody comes by and says, well, what are you looking for? And he tells him what he's looking for. And he said, well, where did you lose it? He said, well, I lost it in the house. And he said, well, what are you doing out here looking for it? He said, because this is the only place that there's a light. So I'm looking for it where there's the light. Well, we're looking for the answer of the darkness, looking and wondering why we can't find the light. And the light isn't accessible to us as long as we're looking in the darkness. Put no confidence at all in darkness to illuminate your understanding, for if you do, you contradict the light and thereby think you see the darkness. So again, don't put your confidence in the darkness to illuminate or understand, because you're not going to find the answer here. Again, the information that we gander from the course, we're going to gander it over here, the words, the information, but the experience of what those words mean can only be accessed or experienced here. Because this literally contradicts this. I've given the example many times. There's a line between these two. Nowhere do they touch. Nowhere do they interpenetrate each other. It's this thought system or this thought system. And I would guess most of us that come to the course, I know for myself for sure, when we first came to the course, that concept of the unequivocal nature of this course was a little hard to take. I want a little in between here, man. And the course says, no, black or white, that's it. That's all we have to offer you. But as we progress in the course and we understand it on a deeper and deeper level, we understand what a gift it is that I can't cross over these two, because I'm either in the ego or I'm not in the ego, and I'm aligned with truth, and there is no other choices here. And anytime I lose my peace in any way, shape, or form, no matter how big or small it is, it's representative of the fact that I've chosen for the ego. Yet darkness cannot be seen, for it is nothing more than a condition in which seeing becomes impossible. And even with the idea of walking into a totally dark room, that's what we would describe darkness. But if you flip on the switch and turn on the light, you begin to see that the darkness was simply the absence of the light. And what we normally try to do is try to figure out what the darkness is. Why did it happen? How come it, why can't I figure out how to fix the darkness? And on and on and on and on and on and on we go as a good little ego trying to figure things out. And the answer is turn on the light. But I have to step over here in order to turn off the light. I can't take this over here and have the light on at the same time. I have to be willing to drop my investment in what the darkness is. And we're so good. I mean, it's such an amazing setup of evaluating what the darkness is and thinking we're going to solve the problem within the problem instead of dropping the problem. So on to paragraph number 4. You who have not yet brought all of the darkness you have taught yourself into the light in you can hardly judge the truth and value of this course. Yet God did not abandon you. And so you have another lesson sent from him, already learned for every child of light by him, to whom God gave it. This lesson shines with this lesson shines with God's glory, for in it lies his power, which he shares so gladly with his Son. Learn of his happiness, which is yours. But to accomplish this, all your dark lessons must be brought willingly to truth and joyously laid down by hands open to receive, not closed to take. Every dark lesson that you bring to him who teaches light, he will accept from you because you do not want it. And he will gladly exchange each one for the bright lesson he has learned for you. Never believe that any lesson you have learned apart from him means anything. Wow, that was a real treat of a paragraph. All right, so you have not yet brought all the darkness you have taught yourself into the light in you, can hardly judge the truth and value of this course. So basically what he's trying to say is, until or when you completely drop all your investment in the darkness, you won't fully understand or accept the value that the course has to offer us. You will have flashes of awareness of it occasionally, but you won't get the full value of it until you completely let go of all investments in thinking that you know anything. Okay. And again, we have to take ourselves where we are. So if you read a line like this, we're not asked to make ourselves feel horrible or terrible because I haven't been able to do that yet. He's just trying to help us recognize that if you do come to that place, you will find the answer to everything that you've ever needed or wanted. And it won't be because of what you did. It will be because of you getting out of the way. Yet God did not abandon you. In other words, God still remains ready and waiting for us when we eventually do come to the point where we leave all darkness behind and choose only the light. And, to me, that's one of the most comforting things of the Course, that and the idea of none of your illusions will ever have any effect on the truth of who God is or the truth of who you are. So all this playing in the sandbox of the ego that we do literally can't affect the truth of what we are. And I find great comfort in that, though I'm not always convinced in the moment when I'm playing in the darkness. And so you have another lesson sent from him, in other words, from the Holy Spirit or God, because it's capitalized, already learned for every child of light by him to whom God gave. So basically what this means is you have the ability to offer your brother this light when you drop your investment in believing what your eyes are telling you about your brother. Then you slip over here and you can't but help offer to your brother that you're the same instead of different. And be very aware that this setup, when we projected into the world and made our brother guilty so that we could appear to be innocent, was to keep us stuck, constantly trying to figure out ways of solving problems in the world and making the other person do something different so that I could be okay. Never, ever with the awareness that underneath that black that I had covered over here was where the real problem lied. And as long as I was playing in this arena trying to solve the problem, the answer could never be found. And it's only when we can step above and realize the answer to this came from the choice of separation. And the answer to that is nothing happened. Well, that's what it says right here. Nothing happened. But as long as we're in the sandbox of, oh no, it really happened, there's something really happened, will I not be able to see that nothing happened? So again, when you drop your investment in seeing your brother as guilty and you choose for the Holy Spirit, you are then reflecting to your brother the answer of truth instead of recycling the answer of the false. This is such a gift. And I don't have to figure out how to do it. I don't have to solve the problem. I have to drop my investment in believing my brother's my problem. Even though literally every ounce of who you are attests to the fact that no, I was fine until something showed up and showed me that I have a problem. So it has to be them. It can't possibly be me. And again, that's the setup of this whole process to keep us stuck within the illusion. All right, so this lesson shines with God's glory, for in it lies his power, which he shares gladly with his Son. So again, the answer lies in his power. We talked in that first paragraph. My power, my belief is that my power lies in my choice for separation, where I could be in charge. Well, the real power can only be accessed when I drop my false power and align with the connection of what true power is. And as it says, he's offering it to us nonstop. It's always available. But it takes me the investment in acknowledging that I don't know anything. And that means I don't know that I'm really the innocent victim and that other situation or person is a perpetrator. All I'm seeing is the effect of a dualistic thought system being played out on the screen. And that's not the reality of what's going on. All right. And again, the idea that God will share this answer gladly when I drop my investment in the ego. Learn of his happiness, which is yours. And, again, all the attributes that are God's were freely and are freely available to us as long as I drop my investment in the acceptance of the belief of what I am as the separated son instead. So again, his happiness is our happiness. as long as we invest in that answer instead of our own. But to accomplish this, all your dark lessons must be brought willingly to truth. And I'm just going to stop there. And you know, how often, when even if we practice the course, our initial relationship with our brother in an argument or an upset is, I'm right, he's wrong. I have to prove to him that I got this under control. How willing are we to just simply drop that? You know, if in the midst of a very heated argument or upset, someone walked by and whispered in your ear, you could choose differently. How many of us would do it if we were so invested in the heatedness of that experience? Probably a lot of us aren't ready for that yet, which really reflects with the concept that we're not willing to only know truth. We still have a big investment in being right and being in charge. But when we do come to that place, when we are totally willing to find the truth, and we will then joyously lay down my hands open, I want to know, rather than hands that are closed to take. Because when I'm looking from here, I want God to come over here and tell me I'm right and my brother's wrong, and then I'll feel better about myself, and I will have killed off my brother to exist in the dualistic world. The only way I can come over here is with empty hands, with empty arms. If I think I know anything, I've got my hands closed to the ability to understand what truth is. And I would say in our practice of that, when stuff comes up, observe yourself. Are my hands closed? Do I think I know the answer? Or are my hands open and willing to find out what the answer is? And if they're still closed, just smile at it and go, guess I'm not ready to embrace that yet. That's just where I am right now. Help me to come to the point where I'm willing to drop that. And again, we are so addicted to this thought system. We really don't have any inkling of an awareness of how addicted we still are to this. And quite literally, for those few moments that we may be willing in our day to drop it, we should be patting ourselves on the back for the fact that in the midst of this addiction, I have been able to drop that even for a second. The ego will always say, well, you know, you didn't do a very good job. You know, you should have asked sooner, you should have whatever. And that's kind of the way the ego keeps us stuck in this of recycling the guilt or the fear that is so prevalent in our mind. Every dark lesson that you bring to him, capital him and capital who, bring to him who teaches light, he will accept from you because you do not want it. So when we really are willing to drop it, he will accept it as the choice because we do want this more than we want that now. And again, it's which one is running the show is the one that we're most invested in, whether it's on a subconscious level and I'm not aware of it, or on a conscious level. Whichever one is more invested is the one that's going to run the show in any given instant. So if you see yourself automatically respond out of kill or be killed, just know the answer was I wanted this more than I wanted that. And that's what brought this experience. But in any given instant, I can refocus. I can change that story. But it's all up to me. And he will gladly exchange each one for the bright lesson he has learned for you. And again, he said earlier, you know, the darkness was the lesson that I wanted to learn. He will offer the lesson of light, and that's really what I want. And you know, there's a line that says, when you want the peace of God more than anything, it will be yours. But to the degree we're still invested in our egos, that will keep us from wanting it only as his. Never believe that any lesson you have learned apart from him means anything. So again, he kind of starts back to that first line in this section. You do not know anything. Well, nothing that we think we've learned, nothing that we accept as our reality here means anything. Now that's good news, guys, because we think we're letting go of something that has value. And in truth, we're letting go of something that really had no meaning to begin with. But we're not convinced that that's our experience yet. We still think there's great value in my interpretation, my belief, my identification, my, me, mama, moo, moo. But none of that is who we really are. So this becomes a process of, letting go of what no longer has value to us, or observing how it still does have value to us, and the recognition that I'm just not ready to let it all go yet. And that's not something we have to feel bad about. In fact, if we feel bad about it, we're recycling the guilt. It's just simply a fact of where I happen to be right now. And the more we can accept ourselves where we are, because he does, the more quickly we're going to make that next choice to choose differently. Anybody have any comments about that paragraph? It looks like no. So we only have a few minutes, but we'll carry on with paragraph 5 then. You have one test as sure as God by which to recognize if what you learned is true. If you are wholly free of fear of any kind, and if all those who meet or even think of you share your perfect peace, then you can be sure that you have learned God's lesson and not your own. Unless all this is true, there are dark lessons in your mind that hurt and hinder you and everyone around you. The absence of perfect peace means but one thing. You think you do not will for God's Son what his Father wills for him. Every dark lesson teaches this in one form or another. And each bright lesson with which the Holy Spirit will replace the dark ones you do not accept teaches you that you will with the Father and his Son. All right, so Jesus is offering to us a test to see how we're doing. And basically what he's saying is when you come to the place where literally nothing of the world can tempt you, can pull you into its claws, can make you feel bad, guilty, sad, anything, any attribute that the illusion describes, if you aren't drawn into any of that, it's a representation that you are aligned with who you really are, because none of this will affect you when you're here. And I spoke earlier of Jesus dying on the cross. And so, certainly, I don't think anybody in this room, I know for sure for myself, if that were my classroom today, I probably wouldn't do a very good job of just staying totally centered in my mind. But he was at a point at that place in his life where he could go through that experience of being called names, having his clothes stripped from him, being blamed on something he didn't do, the whole shebang, and he was able to totally align with his right mind. So none of that affected him at all. And I think it's a kind of a fun way to look at this is if you're wearing a raincoat, you could go out in torrential rain, but you would be protected. It's still raining, it's still torrential, but you're being protected by this shield of the raincoat. And in a lot of ways, that's how this process works. When you align with this, you're protected not from what's happening, but by it coming in on you, because your alignment in your mind is totally set in what is truth instead of what the false is. All right, so you would be, if you are wholly free of fear of any kind. I mean, for us, just even imagining an experience where I could be totally free from any fear. That's almost beyond our capacity to embrace, because literally everything of our world is some type of a projection of some type of fear. All right, so if you are wholly free of fear of any kind, and if all those who meet or even think of you share in perfect peace, then you can be sure that you have learned God's lesson and not your own. And this is a little tricky section in the respect that it makes it sound like everywhere you turn, everywhere you will see peace, but that's really not what it means. What it means is you will stay steadfast in your experience of staying connected to that peace no matter what happens on the outside. Unless all this is true, there are dark lessons in your mind that hurt and hinder you and everyone else around you. And they hurt and hinder you because you're aligned with the darkness, and it will affect everyone around you because you're invested in the darkness, and you perpetuate the darkness when you align with the darkness. So you're literally feeding the thing that we would say we don't want or we don't like. And we're keeping our brother sucked into that as well. Only when we drop this and align with this that we bring our brother with us as a possibility of another choice than the one that we have attached to and we have played in ever since the beginning of the Big Bang. Let's see. So again, we as individuals choosing for the atonement not only offer our freedom, we represent another way for our brother. And I've given the example of this is what kill or be killed as two egos looks like. So when one of you stops that flow, that purpose, you offer another possibility for that other individual instead of reinvesting or reinforcing this. And that person may try to push you off that place of peace because that's its job. And you did have a contract with that individual. But that individual will either, I guess you could say, see the light, since we're talking about light and darkness, see the light and then come to that awareness, or that individual will find somebody else or something else in the world because they're not ready to see the light yet. But either way, you have placed that different way of being, different way of experience, and allowed them that opportunity when they're ready. And basically, Jesus speaks in the course of the moment that he got it, we all got it. But to the degree we still invest in our belief system of the ego, we won't know that we have it. And we will go and find other things to relate to because we're not ready to connect with him. But eventually we will make that choice where we will stand up and walk next to him instead of making him special and me, the schmuck here. And I think I'll just end at that, and we'll start again next time with that paragraph. So I'll mark that, and we will. Any quick comments before we close?
Thank you, Marianne.
You are welcome, Bob. All right, I am going to mute everybody, and as we've done in the past, I'll mute you. I'll read the closing prayer, and then if anybody wants to stay on for a little while, you're welcome to stay on. So let me mute, and all right, everybody take a nice big deep breath and let it all go. Forgive us our illusions, Father, and help us to accept our true relationship with you, in which there are no illusions and where none can ever enter. Our holiness is yours. What can there be in us that needs forgiveness when yours is perfect? The sleep of forgetfulness is only the unwillingness to remember your forgiveness and your love. Let us not wander into temptation, for the temptation of the Son of God is not your will. And let us receive only what you have given, and accept but this into minds which you
which you have
created.
created
which
and
you
you love. Amen.
All right. I hope everybody has a great week, and I hope to see you next week. And in the meantime, have a good time practicing.
Thanks, Marie.